Sidechaining a kick drum to a bass track is a sound we're probably all too familiar with these days. Quite often this is done by sending the kick drum signal directly to a compressor on the bass track, creating that swelling effect. Here's a bass I made with Yuhi's Diva virtual analog synth. Here's how it sounded raw. And now let's add the kick drum into the sidechain. If you use your actual kick drum track to do this, you're going to put limitations on yourself because you wouldn't want to make any destructive changes to the actual kick drum. So here I've duplicated the kick drum track to a separate track and set the output directly to the compressor, and you can use the compressor's release time to control the speed of the swelling effect. Because we're never going to actually hear the audio from this track, we can start chopping it up and trying different things to see what happens. Here's a duplicate of the track with some various changes throughout the progression. You can try adding fades, time stretching, changing the volume, or even removing some of the hits completely. Let's take a closer look at one of the kick hits here. By using the time compression and expansion tool, we can change the duration of the duplicated kick drum. So let's listen to that. The original. Again. And now let's take a listen to the whole example. This is one of my favorite methods for creating interesting and rhythmic sounds. Let's start by using a simple pad. Now on another virtual instrument track, I've loaded up Massive, and I've turned off all the oscillators, and I'm just going to trigger the noise generator from my MIDI keyboard here. Of course, you can do this with any sound you like. Now I'm going to send the output of this noise generator to an expander on the Omnisphere track. By keying the gate to the noise, we're only going to hear the pad when Massive is outputting signal. I can then use the range to decide if I want silence in between the rhythms I've played or just less signal to create more of a pulse. You can also invert this concept with a compressor. For the bass in this track, I've reversed the above method. Using another instance of Massive, I'm sending a signal into a compressor on a bass track. But now instead of using the generator to trigger a rhythm, it's now going to push the signal away when my MIDI notes are played, like this. Now here's the whole example, and note that I'm using the same gate on the pads and lead synths. This is the drum track from a recent song I was producing. The setup was really unconventional and we were going for a really vibey sound. The reverb is crucial to creating the feel that we wanted. Although I'm not sending any kick drum directly to the reverb, the kick and the overheads and room mics are creating too washy of a sound for my taste. Now bringing down the volume of the reverb's output would have had a totally unnatural feel, and it also would have affected the decay coming from previous notes. So how can we control that? Well, I've added a compressor before my reverb and duplicated the kick drum track, which is being sent into the reverb's compressor. This means we're able to attenuate how much signal is being sent directly to the reverb. Already this helps. As fast as the compressor is, there's still a bit of transit getting through, but we can push this duplicated kick drum back and cause the compressor to clamp down on the volume before the actual hit. Listen to the tail of these reverb hits. Now shifted. And back. And shifted again. Let's say that you've been given a drum loop to work with that's already a stereo file. Adding reverb could be problematic here. Now we can do this in a number of ways, but I'm going to make use of Massey's incredible DRT software. I would highly recommend this to everyone. Now we're going to analyze that entire drum loop and select just a little bit of the kick drum and use the feature they have called Learn. DRT will now learn the kick drum sound and try to find that throughout the loop. I can bring this similarity slider back down a bit, and now it looks like we're pretty much just getting the down and up beats, so we're pretty close. Now let's go back to the timeline window, and here we have a sensitivity and loudness slider if we need it. Now it looks like we've really got pretty much just the kick drums. I think it's missed just one or two here. We can zoom in really close, and we can see that it's grabbed one extra snare drum and it's missing one kick. So I can quickly remove that snare hit. Now let's add that kick drum back. I can add it here, and then I can go way into the transient and line it up right. Let's zoom out a bit, and now over here on the right we have a loudness slider. And now we can go to the samples, and I can load up any sample I'd like. Here's a simple square wave I've made with the signal generator. I can drop down a track and use render to sample accurately place that wave that I generated. Let's shift the square wave back a little bit to trigger the compressor ahead of the actual kick drum sounds in the loop. And we're going to send that square wave out of a bus right into the key input of the compressor. And you can use the compressor's depth settings to control how much signal is being sent to the reverb every time the kick hits. Now let's add some delay to the snare drum in this loop. So I'm going to start by doing the same thing, and I'm going to use Massey's DRT again to analyze this drum loop. So let me open up DRT again. So let's click Analyze, and then we're going to have to find just a snare hit in here. So we're going to zoom in real tight and try to get just a little bit of the snare hit there. And then we're going to tell it to learn that. And we can move all the sliders again until we see that DRT is just getting the downbeats for the snare hits. That looks pretty much right. Let's go back to the timeline. We can bring our loudness level up. And it looks like we're still missing that one. So let me click here to add that, and then try to line up the transient. It does get a bit squirrely as you move the mouse left and right, but there you can see the transient. And we're good to go, and we can drop down a track and use render again, this time just using Massey's internal signal generator. Note that DRT also has a MIDI drag and drop feature, which is great for sending MIDI notes to things like Drumagog, Trigger, or pretty much anything you want. Now this time we're going to use an expander instead of a compressor, so that signal from the drum loop is only sent to the delay when it's triggered by the waveforms we generated. This is a really great way to give you some flexibility and control over drum loops that have already been made, or drum tracks that were already printed into stereo. This final example is built around dynamic delay in a vocal track. It's a great effect made famous by the TC Electronics 2290. The idea is that we only hear the delay when the singer stops singing, or reversely, we only hear it while they're singing. I've duplicated the vocal track and slid it back just a bit, and I'm sending that to a compressor placed after the delay plugin.
You don't own me. Don't try to change me in any way.
You have the option of placing the compressor before or after the delay. Do you want to attenuate the signal going to the delay, or just how much of it we're able to hear?
You don't own me.
And I'm using a little bit of reverb just to give the delay a little extra decay. For the second half, I've moved the compressor before the delay, and now I simply remove audio from the doubled vocal track to indicate when I want the signal to reach the effect.
Oh, I don't tell you what to say. I don't tell you what to do. So
the attack and especially the release settings help to create a feel that might not be so easily achievable if you were to just ride or send the level via a bus. So let's take a listen.
You don't own me. try to change me in any way. You don't own me. Don't tie me down, 'cause I'd never stay. Oh, I don't tell you what to say. I don't tell you what to do. So just let me be myself, and that's all I ask of you. I'm young, and I love to be young. I'm free, and I love to be free. To live my life the way I want. To say and do whatever I please.
So you see, there's a lot of different things you can accomplish with audio controlling audio.